Hello and welcome back to the Brit Iron podcast. Today is episode 15 in our season preview and individual team ranking, and today is the 18th team, and it's a team of much contention amongst the boys.
Say that
again. And this is going to seem like a little bit of a boxing match, with Matt and Sam being on very much different sides of the fence.
We haven't even started, and I'm already trying not to swear at him.
So, Pittsburgh Steelers. Matt, let's start us off with the first punch.
Right. So this may prove to be the biggest hot take in some of these previews yet. But I personally think the Steelers are the perfect storm of a team to disappoint a fan base this season. For me personally, I think Big Ben coming back off an injury, I'm not convinced. I think this could be the season where it kind of signals the end of Big Ben's reign with the Steelers. I'm not convinced. I think fantasy-wise, he might put up good numbers because he's a gunslinger. But I think in terms of managing that team and managing the ball, I'm not convinced. I personally don't think he'll play all 16 games, which is why I've got them lower. I see him getting injured around the halfway point. Similar to that, James Conner. At points, he had a really good season. He came out and it's like, oh, he's going to take over from Lev Bell. The Steelers' backfield's in good hands. At points, his average yardage, these yards per carry, have really dropped. I didn't really like what I saw from him last year. Obviously, it's without a quarterback, and it was a bit of a mess on that offense. But for me, I think it was a bit of a one-season wonder. And with Juju, he's leading a wide receiver core that I'm not convinced by. And I think without someone like Antonio Brown there, without a wide receiver one, Juju can't be as efficient as he needs to be in that team. For me personally, I don't see him as a guy who can lead it. And I just think, as I said, it's a perfect storm for things to go wrong. And a couple of injuries, offense to fall apart. I will say the defense is good. They are a very good young defense. They've got a lot of good pieces in it. But I personally don't think it's going to be enough this season. And I've got them at 6-10, with 4 of those wins coming very early in the season, injuries happening, and it all just kind of falling apart in Pittsburgh for me.
Go on then, Sam. What's your punch back there?
Right. Before I go into all of my talk about the Steelers, I really love the Steelers going forward. I don't have them statted out at major wins. I've got them 9-7, scraping a playoffs, but I'm very much of the opinion once you get playoffs, it's the start of a new season, and I'm going to go out and say it now. I think they are one of my dark horse Super Bowl teams. I would be happy to put money on them winning the Super Bowl this year.
I will take that bet all day.
They've got to go through Kansas and Baltimore, but if anyone's going to beat Baltimore, it's going to be the Steelers, I think, with that defense. And at the end of the day, I only need Big Ben to show up for one game against Kansas City and throw for 500 yards, which we know he can do. I need one game out of him. Before I go into everything around the team that they have there, I want to take you back to 2015. I want you to go back 5 years, and I want you to look at the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos and that defense and the ghost of Peyton Manning went all the way to the Super Bowl 50 championship. If the ghost of Peyton Manning can do that with the team they had in Denver, then I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that Big Ben can do similar with the squad he has around him. Big Ben, yes, he was injured last year, but the year before he was coming off of a 5,000-yard season. The guy's still got juice in the tank. Maybe he does fall off a cliff. Peyton Manning fell off a cliff and won a Super Bowl. People remember the Super Bowl, not the fact he fell off a cliff. Like I said, I need to see a couple of massive games at the right time from Big Ben. And at the end of the day, Big Ben is a first-ballot Hall of Famer who is a baller. He needs to show up in 1 or 2 games in January. That's all they need to do. They won 8 games last year with nobody throwing them the ball. Like, literally nobody. You could probably get someone off the street who'd be a better quarterback than who they had throwing the ball last year. It was pretty appalling. You suddenly throw in someone who's a first ballot Hall of Famer who you know can show up on 1 or 2 days. That's all you need. I mean, Brock Osweiler won like 5 or 6 games with that Broncos team. If Brock Osweiler can do it, so can Big Ben. And that's without me even getting into the weapons on that team. I do not understand how you've got them at 6 and 10. I'd be really interested to see who you've got them losing to.
Quite a lot. I'm trying to find times to run it through. I mean, the big point I want to come back with on that is Big Ben is not Peyton Manning. I think for me, Peyton Manning, he's a dressing room guy. He brings a team together. He gets it. The right character within a team brings it together and says, we are going to do this. Even if I'm not playing my best, we're going to see this through, and he can bring the team there. I know Big Ben has done it before. I'm not arguing his legacy. I'm not arguing he shouldn't be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm saying purely taking this as the 2020 season. I personally think he's more quarterback that at times divides the locker room. And I think it's all good with everything that happened last season, going 8-8. To do it twice in a row, it takes a different kind of character within a team. And just for me, I just don't see it. I just don't see him finishing the year.
I think the thing for me is they've just got so many weapons. Like, let's take the defense out of it, because in my opinion, that's probably a top 3 defense in the league next year. You've got some absolute studs on that defense. TJ Watt is going to be a defensive player of the year candidate. You've got, what's his name? His name is evading me.
Minkah Fitzpatrick?
Minkah Fitzpatrick, thank you, Matthew. You've got Minkah Fitzpatrick, who is also going to be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. When you've got 2 guys on your defense that are both Defensive Player of the Year candidates, then you're in for a good start. I quite like Terrell Edmonds going forward. I think he's young. He's shown some potential. He's a nice piece to have on that defense. They've got places across the defense that are going to be nice. So let's just put them away and say, yes, top 3 defense. You then look at their offense. You go position by position. Running back, James Conner, Pro Bowl running back. If he plays 16 games, if he plays 16 games behind that O-line, he is a Pro Bowl caliber running back. Now, he has health concerns. I will concede that. They've got so much depth there. Benny Snell has been shown to be productive on when he's been on the field. I really like the pickup of Anthony McFarland Jr. He's sat on that roster. Jalen Samuels has had his moments. You've got quite a lot of depth. Yes, you don't have any home run guys who are like, yes, you don't have a McCaffrey or a Zeke or a Saquon, but you've got 4 or 5 very serviceable running backs. And behind that O-line, I'll take that. You then go to wide receiver. You've got Juju Smith-Schuster, who I think is primed for a return to form. Maybe not to a 1,400 yards like he was when he was playing next to AB, but I think he will get bounced back. I foresee a 1,100 yard and 6 or 7 touchdown season, which is very good from a top wide receiver. You've got James Washington, who I think is primed to make the jump, and you could see from James Washington a similar season to what Juju had 3 or 2 years ago when he was playing behind AB. You've got Ryan Switzer, who is not... No one's going to go, oh yes, he's a great guy, but he's a reliable slot guy. He will catch balls. You've then got a couple of other guys, Deontay Johnson, primed to make a jump. I think he could have some real value there. Chase Claypool, I think, might turn out to be one of the steals of the draft, and I'm not going to turn around and say that the Steelers can't draft wide receivers, because that seems to be what they do best.
Yeah, that's very true.
You move to the tight end room. You've got Eric Ebron, who... first round pick many years back. He had his issues, but he's shown recently that he can be a touchdown monster. I also like Vance McDonald for just being an absolute machine on the field. He's going to run people over. So I'm going through there. That's before I even get to the offensive line, and I'm naming 2 or 3 guys at each position that I really like. You throw in a quarterback then who only needs to show up every now and then because the defense can carry them to wins. Yes, they're in a tricky division, but the way I foresee it is they just need to get to January. Then they get to January, and it is very much a 4-game season, and it's if you can get past this guy. And I think they're a team that on their day can go toe-to-toe with anyone.
Yeah. Perhaps I could... give my 2 pennies in this one, because I was very much in the middle. I went 8-8, which is slap bang in the middle. I know, Sam, you mentioned the schedule in last season. I actually think arguably last season was an easier schedule for them, if you look at the games they had and the games they had this year. So I think they will struggle a bit more in that regard. Moving on to the running back, James Conner. Yeah, he had a down year last year. I think everyone knows that. Looking at his stats, his yards per game went from 74 to 46. So I know he was injured for a few games, but he did not perform as well. So for me to see the Steelers do better, I need him to get back to that year before level. You mentioned Juju as well. I mean, I don't like him as a wide receiver 1, which I think, Matt, you said as well. And I think we saw that last year when, his numbers just dropped massively. However, Sam did mention
him the ball.
Yeah, granted. But as a wide receiver 1, granted, yes. But just as a wide receiver 1, not a big fan. But as you mentioned, Sam, they've drafted a lot of receivers, a lot of young receivers who can step up because they have got that ability. It's just a case of who, I suppose, at this point. So my question to you, Matt, on this one is around the quarterback, because I know you said that this is his last year. This is Big Ben's last year. Now, it's interesting because this team on this day have got 5 quarterbacks listed on their roster. Now, do you see this as the Steelers preparing for Big Ben to leave and one of these guys to take over? Or do you see it perhaps they're just backups for now and they're looking to draft someone next year?
I think there's a little part of that they've seen him go down and they've seen the options in there aren't the most reliable, aren't really the guy that's going to take the job off him. But I think they're carrying this many quarterbacks into what no one could have foreseen, what's happened with this off-season. So I think the plan around this would have been bring in 5 guys and just have kind of a shootout behind Big Ben for earn that second, if we're going to carry 3 just in case, the second and third QB spots on this team. I personally am not convinced that the guy is there to follow up. But I think they're just...
Say that again.
Yeah, like, I think they've obviously, you've got to have some side, but I just don't think there's anything there for when Big Ben goes. And I think the big thing for me with Big Ben is just, I really do see him throwing games away this year. I just see he has, the way he's a gunslinger, there is going to come a time when that arm goes and when he goes, I think he is going to massively fall off. And I think we could be talking Jameis numbers of interceptions when he does fall off. Because the way he will throw that ball about, he's one of those quarterbacks. He's an elite quarterback, but I think out of the elite quarterbacks, he's the one that's known for throwing picks more than anyone in that top, over the years, quarterback conversation of sort of in our generation of football. Just for me, I just don't like the quarterback room, and I think we could roll through this and we could hash this out, and we've done it before. We've already done it, I think, quite a few times. Debate this over and over. I think it's one of those things we're just going to have to wait and see how this turns on the season, because I know me and Sam, and we're not going to find an agreement within the next sort of 10, 15 minutes on this one. And it'll be very interesting to see.
The big thing for me is I see this roster and I think they're a win now team. And when I look at the stats that Big Ben has put up from his most recent 16-game season, 5,129 yards, 34 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, and a touchdown percentage of 5%. If he can keep that touchdown percentage at 5% and a similar TD to interception ratio with that defense, he doesn't need to throw for 5,000 yards. He can throw for less than 4,000. They can run the ball. They can play good defense. They can make it to January. At which point, I'm putting my money on Big Ben in the same way that Matt will be putting his money on Tom Brady when the Bucks get to January.
Yeah, you got to back your team though.
Of course.
But you're actually backing the player there, not the team, because the team's not. If it was Jameis in the same situation, you wouldn't be putting the money. No, exactly. No. Whereas Big Ben,
not quite to the same level. I might put a bit more now. I might have thrown a $5 on it when it was Jameis, but I'll still back it. But
my point is, I think that when you saw what they could do last year with nobody, there were no NFL quarterbacks throwing the ball last year in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you've got a massive upgrade at quarterback, and the rest of the team has not changed that much. The rest of the team is back. It's the same system. They're a young defense. You've got a lot of players that are breaking out with TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick. And James Conner, I still believe, if he can stay healthy, is that good, especially behind that O-line. I don't think they need to be flashy. And it wouldn't surprise me. I actually agree with Matt. This could very well be Big Ben's last season. I agree with him.
You got him going out on a high.
But I could see him going out being at least in that divisional round.
I think, yeah,
Okay,
the
then.
quickest point for me on that, I think, is if Big Ben does that, and if this team plays to its potential, yes, they should be there in January. That's not what I'm arguing. I'm not arguing the talent. I'm arguing it as a team, for me, on that offense. And I, personally, as I said, I just don't trust it. I've just got this gut feeling. But as I said, we could do this all day.
Each to their own.
So I think,
Yeah,
I think it's time we hit up a bit of fantasy.
I was going to move on to the fantasy side of things, and I would like to stick on the Big Ben front, to be honest with you. But I know, Matt, you probably aren't drafting Big Ben at all, from what we've heard.
No, I'd stream him. some
Stream
weeks.
him.
But he's not a guy I'd draft, personally.
Yeah, I wouldn't draft him.
You won't draft. That was my next question. But if, for example, there was a scenario where fantasy was just for the playoff bit, and that was your season, it was like a short fantasy season, would you then draft him, Sam? Because I know you're quite high on him for that little run of games there in January.
I'm not sure if it's that I'm high on him statistics-wise or fantasy-wise. I'm very much high on him in the sense that I've seen him do it before. You've seen Lamar Jackson light the league on fire last season, and then he gets into a playoff game and it all kind of falls apart. Now, that, for all we know, that could be Lamar Jackson falling apart in a big moment. That could be the fact that the team they were playing the Titans just schemed better against them, and they knew everyone's kind of figured him out now. But I've consistently seen Big Ben win playoff games, and with that team, I think it's very possible. In the same way Peyton Manning, you just have to turn around and you say, look, don't lose us the game. And they're good enough that they won't.
I think, yeah, if you're talking about them in the playoffs, I think for me, I would favour as well. Often, unless it's sort of sometimes like a Mahomes-esque guy who only can do it.
Yeah.
I like older quarterbacks in playoffs because they've done it, they've been there. And I think that's part of why Nick Foles is some of his best performances and the performances he'll be remembered for.
It's why he got
when
a
it counts.
massive contract, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I think sometimes the older guy who's been there before, just got a bit of like a wiser head on their shoulders, doesn't get caught up in the moment, is better for playoffs. And I would agree with that. I think, yeah, if you get Big Ben to that point of the year, if he gets there, he's got them all that way, he's stayed healthy, and he's probably in the back of his head thinking, this is my chance to go out on top, then it's a different conversation for me compared to on the season, because you're suddenly talking about maybe, depending on what rounds, or 3-4 games as opposed to 16.
Yeah, certainly. Maybe to move away from the quarterback at this point and move on to the running back room in James Conner. Whereabouts would you be looking to draft him, if at all?
I think that's a tough one for me, because I can, if I'm at a spot when he's going, and he's a starting running back on a team that could have a very productive offense if everything goes right, he's going to be going in that early call of that sort of second round, maybe third if you've got a wide receiver heavy draft in sort of standard scoring, maybe a little bit later towards PPR. It's going to vary, but I think I personally wouldn't be jumping to him at that value. He could by all means come out, be a running back one, a top 12 finishing guy in the season, and I can 100% see that. Just for me, I don't personally want to take the risk on it, because I think as the guy there, obviously he was without a quarterback last year, which puts more pressure on him. He's done it one year, he didn't the other, so for me it's a 50-50 kind of a you hit it or you not.
I agree with that. I, again, wouldn't be drafting him probably where his ADP is. If he slips to the 4th round, I'll take him, because, like Matt said, starting running back, the Steelers, Mike Tomlin has consistently shown that he likes to feed one running back the ball, similar to Norv Turner or something like that. So if you can get James Conner, like he did 2 seasons ago, that he's healthy, he's on the field, and he's productive, he's going to consistently get a shed ton of carries and a shed ton of fantasy points. But there are the questions around the injuries with him, so I wouldn't be drafting him any earlier than the 4th, really. And if he slips down there, he's a great value pick. But
I think if he's there 4th, 5th, if he does drop to there, 100% I'm picking. If I can get a starting running back who's probably going to be a bell cow there, I just don't think he would drop. Because I think he's another one, a name on an offense that people think of the good season, not necessarily last season.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think that's how I'd class anyone on this roster, to be honest, for fantasy terms. Like, obviously, I've already said, I think this team can win a lot of games, can make it to January, and are a dark horse team. They're one of the teams that could really they're good enough that they could be the Tennessee Titans of this year, or they somehow find themselves in the championship game, only suddenly they've got Big Ben instead of Tannehill in the championship game, who could go off.
Yeah.
However, for fantasy, I don't necessarily see a lot of production like that. I've already said I don't think Big Ben's going to throw for 5,000 yards. This could be his last season. We don't know that Juju fits in very, very well at that wide receiver 1 spot, so where he's going to be drafted may not be a great payoff for what you actually get for him. So I think a lot of these guys are guys that you want to watch, and if they drop to a round or 2 below their average draft position, you're probably getting them at a more reasonable value for the payoff you're going to get. But I'm not necessarily looking to draft any of the players on this team where they would be expected to go in a draft, purely because I think at a similar spot you could get better value for that pick.
Yeah, I think I'd 100% agree with that. And one big point for me as well is Sam mentioned the number of weapons on that team. There is a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. You don't have a guy like Eric Ebron coming in and he's going to be expecting red zone targets. He is going to be expecting to be a guy that gets targeted heavily in those situations. That's going to take away from the value that Vance McDonald was getting, because he was starting to look like he could be a guy that breaks in. Before last season, it was like he could break that tight end, sort of the high end tight end club, if you want to call it that, in fantasy. But now there's competition there, and that's going to reduce both their value. Same for Juju. Can he play in that role well? They've got a lot of other receivers who could emerge. There's too many questions on them. That as Sam said, if they drop a couple rounds, I'll take them. But at their ADP currently, for me, majoritively, there's just better. The guys I trust more. I think I'm just worried about getting burnt by a lot of these.
Yeah. The other thing, very quickly, that does have to be said about James Conner is that if, with him coming in, even if he stays healthy, everything like that, they went out and drafted Anthony McFarland Jr., who can catch out the backfield. And in my opinion, like going back and watching his tape, I really like him as a player. And I think that will take, if nothing else, that will take away some targets from James Conner, which is massive in fantasy. Again, one of these things that I think the Steelers have potential to be a great team this year, but fantasy-wise, there's no one on that team that I'm thinking, yes, that's my number one guy.
Yeah, I think that's big to say as well. Fantasy redraft, I think that's been quite centered around. But there are some names, it's just sort of McFarland Jr., maybe even Juju if he doesn't work out in this role, but they adjust his role a bit. There's a few guys that in Dynasty, don't be afraid to go near, because that's a very different game. It's a deeper draft. You've got your bench there. Yeah. So in Dynasty, a couple of the guys we mentioned there, by all means. But for redraft leagues, just be a little bit careful. Don't get too caught up in the names or the team name and the history of it all.
Yeah, the recurring theme here is definitely sort of err on the side of caution. Yeah. But there's one thing I'd like to finish up on, and this is a bit of a curveball for you guys.
Oh, here we go.
Is I'd like to set up a little bet between you guys, because I know you differ very heavily. So I'm thinking I'm up to change this a little bit, but use the 8 and 8 as a benchmark, because that, for me, was in the middle, and put £10 on the line. And Sam, you must think that they would finish 8 and 8 or above.
I think they're definitely... I think definitely 8 and 8 or above.
And then Matt below.
All right. Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah? £10 bet.
Actually, no, I think actually, as James called it, 8 and 8, if they go completely middle ground, technically that's in between. So if that happens, James gets the money. Yep. 8 and 8, it's James. 9 and 7 and above, it's Sam. Below, so 7 and 9. Just because I think 8
James, don't cry. You're a winner either way, yeah?
I'm potentially giving you money. You might just be grinding up with 20 quid in your pocket.
Yeah, as long as I don't have to put anything into this, I'm very happy to.
It's our tennis. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm happy to take this bet on a little.
We don't endorse gambling, by the way, unless you're of age.
Yeah,
together.
Of course. Unless Bet365 want to be a sponsor, and then.
Oh yeah, then if you're of age, we're not going to get started on gambling.
Yeah, that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah,
a few more beers needed for that one, I think.
Oh yes.
But yeah, that was a nice little conclusion then. So yeah, I look forward to seeing how I win all the money on this one. But on that bombshell, that is all we have got time for today. So, as ever, be sure to check us out on the YouTube. Go like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check us out on the Instagram. We're under the handle @TheBritIron, and it's the same for Twitter as well. And we're also in the process of setting up a listener league. And we've got a couple of posts up on Twitter and Instagram which explain how you can get involved with that. And we're looking to get a draw going for the end of July. So yeah, register your interest, and very exciting times. But for now, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.